Hello everyone and welcome. This is a Ret Paladin guide for Mist of Pandaria. I will cover everything you need to get started with Ret, from talents and glyphs to rotation and stat priorities. Ret has strong burst and useful utility for any group, and I personally see it as an A tier DPS. Alright, let's start by diving into talents. For the first row, I recommend Speed of Light. It increases your movement speed by 70% for 8 seconds and has a 45-second cooldown. It's perfect for quickly getting close to the boss or for getting out of tight spots. For the second row, I go with Fist of Justice. It reduces Hammer of Justice's cooldown by 30 seconds. For the third row, I pick Selfless Healer. Every third judgment you cast gives you an instant flash of light with increased healing. You should use this if you are low on health. For the fourth row, there are two good options depending on what you need. The first option is Unbreakable Spirit. It reduces the cooldown of Divine Shield, Divine Protection and Lay on Hands by 50%. It's great for personal survivability and is the option that I use the most. Another good option is Clemency. It gives Hand of Freedom, Hand of Sacrifice, Hand of Protection and Hand of Salvation 2 charges before going on cooldown, which is really useful on certain boss fights. For the fifth row, I pick Sanctified Wrath. It makes Avenging Wrath last 50% longer and reduces the cooldown of Hammer of Wrath by 50%. This is really strong because Hammer of Wrath is always your hardest hitting ability. Divine Purpose might see some use in AoE situations or later in the expansion with certain tier sets, but right now, Sanctified Wrath is by far the strongest choice. For the last row, you have two options depending on the situation. For single target, you pick Execution Sentence. It's a strong damage over time ability that fits perfectly into your burst windows. For AoE situations, you can swap to Light's Hammer. It deals holy damage over time in an area and is much better when fighting multiple targets. Now it's time to talk about glyphs. We have major glyphs and we have minor glyphs. But the minor ones are purely cosmetic, so we won't talk about those. The first major glyph I use is Glyph of Double Jeopardy. When you use Judgment on a different second target, its damage is increased by 20%. This is really useful for cleave or target swapping. The second glyph I use is Glyph of Inquisition. When you get a killing blow, it increases the duration of Inquisition by 30 seconds. This is really useful in fights with multiple targets. The third glyph I use is Glyph of Templar's Verdict. After casting Templar's Verdict or Exorcism, you take 10% reduced damage for 6 seconds. This adds a bit of passive survivability during your rotation. Now, for dungeons or AoE situations, I usually replace Glyph of Templar's Verdict with Glyph of Mass Exorcism. It makes Exorcism hit all nearby enemies of the primary target for 25% of its damage, but it becomes melee range only, so keep that in mind. Another glyph worth mentioning is Glyph of Hand of Sacrifice. It removes the redirected damage you would normally take when using the ability. This makes the ability a lot safer to use, especially on dangerous boss mechanics. It pairs really well with the Clemency talent, since you'll have 2 charges to work with. With talents and glyphs out of the way, it's time to talk about the rotation, starting with seals. Seal of Truth is your main seal, and you'll be using it for single target and when dealing with 2 to 3 targets. When cleaving, it's very important to keep Sentry Debuff active on all enemies for maximum damage. When you're fighting 4 or more targets, swap to Seal of Righteousness instead. Let's talk about the actual rotation, and I'll break this into 3 parts. Your standard priority outside Avenging Wrath and your burst rotation during Avenging Wrath. Then we'll finish with AoE. The single target rotation outside Avenging Wrath follows this priority list. Keep Inquisition up, ideally at 3 holy power or more. The next thing is to use Execution Sentence on cooldown, unless Avenging Wrath is coming up in the next few seconds. Since Execution Sentence is a 1 minute cooldown and Avenging Wrath is 2 minutes, you'll often use it during Wrath. Just try to line them up when it makes sense. The next priority is to use Templar's Verdict at 5 holy power. If you don't have enough holy power, you want to use a holy power gainer until you have 5 holy power. It's important to note this is a priority list of gainers, so if an ability higher on the list becomes available again, you should use this rather than one lower on the list. Here's the priority. You should use Hammer of Wrath if the target is below 20%. Otherwise, use Crusader Strike, Judgment, then Exorcism. If nothing else is available and you have at least 3 Holy Power, use Templar's Verdict before reaching 5 Holy Power. Continue doing this until Avenging Wrath is available and follow the Avenging Wrath burst rotation. Now I will explain the Avenging Wrath burst phase. When Avenging Wrath is available, you want to use this rotation instead. You still want to maintain Inquisition and make sure it's running and up before using Avenging Wrath. If Guardian of the Ancient Kings is available, use it at the same time as Avenging Wrath. Once Guardian of the Ancient Kings reaches 12 stacks, you want to use Execution Sentence. Not before, but if you don't have Guardians running up, you can use it immediately. Then you want to use Hammer of Wrath every other global, weaving it between a Holy Power spender or a generator. With enough haste, you can cleanly alternate Hammer of Wrath with Crusader Strike or Templar's Verdict. If you don't have enough haste, you might have to use another gainer as well. Continue doing this until Avenging Wrath runs out, then follow the normal rotation outside of Avenging Wrath. I will quickly demonstrate the Avenging Wrath burst rotation. First, I built up 3 Holy Power and used Inquisition. Afterwards, I used Avenging Wrath plus Guardian. Now I weave Hammer of the Wrath with Crusader Strike or Templar's Verdict until Guardian stacks to 12. Then I use Execution Sentence and continue weaving Hammer of the Wrath with Crusader Strike or Templar's Verdict. I'll just keep demonstrating the burst rotation until Avenging Wrath ends. Now I will explain the AoE rotation quickly. You want to do this at 4+ targets. You want to replace Seal of Truth with Seal of Righteousness. You want to replace Crusader Strike with Hammer of the Righteous. You replace Templar's Verdict with Divine Storm. Otherwise, use the normal or the burst Avenging Wrath rotations as normal, but with the replaced abilities. Let's quickly cover the stat priority. You want to first be hit and expertise capped at 7.5%. Then you want to stack as much haste as possible, even using the pure haste gems when you can. Otherwise, use a mixed gem that has haste on it. This is because haste is so strong, and secondary stats gets double the amount of stats compared to the primary attribute gems in MoP. Otherwise, you should try to get strength, then mastery, then crit. For professions, you want engineering and tailoring. Engineering gives you Synapse Springs, a 1-minute unused glove enchant that boosts your damage, and you also get Nitro Boots for extra mobility. Tailoring gives you a cloak enchant called Sword Guard Embroidery. It is a proc effect that gives you 4000 attack power, making it great for burst. If you don't want to go with tailoring, blacksmithing and jewel crafting are also solid alternatives because of the extra sockets and bigger gems, so you can get even more haste. Finally, I just want to say that if you didn't like Kata Ret Paladins, you should definitely give MoP Ret Paladins a chance. They are a lot faster and a lot more fun in my opinion. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and follow me on Twitch. See ya!